my brain just shut out stuff because I would have gone to pieces, right? It would have just been overwhelming. For God's sake, Matthew, make a decision. I said, you guys have got all the same information I've got. You tell me when you've worked it out. Sometimes the best decisions don't make a decision. We saved 2 people, but immediately you go to, well, we lost an employee. One thing that we didn't do well was the recovery post-incident. We didn't do that well at all.
Welcome and thank you for listening. As we record this in the lead up to the 20-year anniversary of Beaconsfield Mine Rescue and ahead of the ANZAC Day 2026, this is an important moment for reflection. As a veteran, ANZAC Day holds deep meaning for me. It's a time to reflect on the values and endure well beyond military service. Courage in the face of uncertainty, initiative when no clear path exists, teamwork under pressure, respect for the people beside you, and mateship. Those values are not confined to the battlefield. They're just as relevant in high-risk industries like mining, where leadership decisions can carry profound human consequences. Today's conversation is not a case study or a technical review. It's a leadership reflection. My guest is Matthew Gill, a highly experienced mining executive with decades involved in the mining industry, particularly in underground environments here in Australia and around the world. At the time of the Beaconsfield rockfall, Matt was the site's mine manager, carrying responsibility for people, decisions made under extreme uncertainty, and the long-term consequences that followed. Welcome to Left of Boom. Matthew, welcome to joining us again here on this podcast. I think it's been 6 years since the last time that we had a similar conversation.
Yep, my house.
At your house in Magpie, I think it was.
Yep, terrible name. Yeah.
We're at that 20-year anniversary now. What's the sort of most strong memories that really sort of come forward to you in moments like this when we're sort of 20 years on from what happened?
It is, as you pointed out, time of reflection. Memories of that 2 weeks are still strong. I don't think you normally would forget, that period. Some memories, my thoughts go to my immediate team at the time, because we'll all be having memories, flashbacks, recollections. So the health and well-being of my immediate team, because I don't think we spend enough time on that post-incident recovery and cathartic talking about it. So that's memory. I still remember what I was doing exactly when the phone rang to let me know. Anecdotal times, interactions with the media, some of the people involved, and then the hard grind after the incident to get going again. So, a whole range of emotions and memories.
You've been in touch recently with Todd and some of the other members that were involved underground. How are they all coping in this lead up to the 20-year anniversary?
Yeah, so Todd's a big bloke, but there's a soft human behind all of that. And I think in particular in the mining industry, it is very blokey still, even though there's a lot better representation of female operators and technicians. And so the general expectation, certainly 20 years ago, was it was a big, tough environment. We'd all get dressed together. We'd go underground together. We'd shower together. You'd spend more time with your mates on the shift than you probably would with your family.
Yeah.
So showing that there's learnings and vulnerability wasn't in the language back then. So Todd's, we're all dealing with that. But he's a good bloke. He's had a few challenges, and it would be unusual if no one had any residual challenges as a result of that 14-day period.
Yeah, I mean, those sort of things have an indelible or leave an indelible mark on people. How have you coped with it over the years, and how are you coping now with it 20 years on yourself? Good
question. So I find talking about it probably the best thing I've done. In fact, we met in 2007 when I gave my experiences for the first time in New South Wales in front of 400 people.
Yep.
And I found over time that that's been very cathartic for me. And when I give that talk, even today, I get a bit emotional, which...
Understandable.
Yeah, but it takes a lot to realise that that's understandable.
Mm.
You know, initially I go, you're a bit of a wuss. You know, toughen up, get on with it, get over it. So, and the memories of, again, my team, the 200 odd people that were involved. Obviously, the wife of Larry that died. Todd and Brant, people right at the epicentre. But other people that were involved as well, New South Wales Mines Rescue, lots of great memories as well.
Yeah, the police inspector unfortunately has passed away a few years ago.
Paul Reynolds, but New South Wales Mines Rescue, so Hatsy and co. We had Paul Featherston there from the Threadbow.
Of course.
So lots of memories of working with people in that, pressure cooker environment. So good and bad, right? And I've likened it to a seesaw. At one end, we saved 2 people, but immediately you go to, well, we lost an employee. So it's like extremes, and reconciling that's a challenge at times. Yeah.
Do you still have much contact with a lot of the team that you worked with during that, and how are they all sort of coping this sort of time frame through as well?
Yeah, so not often, infrequently. We'd probably Rex, and Rex has had we've all had good moments and bad moments. He was the safety manager.
Yep.
Tony Griffith, who was the admin manager, 8 months pregnant at the time. So I've worked with Tony since. One of the team members has since passed away, which Peter Hills, who was a fantastic contributor in the geotech space, and given that the incident was a mining-induced seismic event, played a key role. Newey, who was the maintenance, like a whole bunch of people on and off over time.
So if we go back to that...
I should have mentioned Richard Holder.
Oh, yes,
who was my 2IC.
Yep.
And I still stay in touch with him quite regularly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you go back to even just before, and when we talk about Mateship, the team that you'd formed there was quite special and unique in some ways, because you'd had a hand in selecting and being involved in recruiting all those people. So how important was that as a foundation for the mateship that you formed in this sort of worst case situation?
When I reflect on and talk about, the before, during and after, my comment is, if there was one thing, just one thing, why, notwithstanding, the death of an employee, and we never want to forget Larry Knight, and that needs to be said, the success of getting Todd and Brant out after 14 days, the one thing that I say saw that through was the team.
Yeah.
We had fantastic technical support and police and psychologists and the SCAT team and the employees and Mines Rescue and Mutual Aid. But that team, so my management team were the critical management team, the Emergency Operations Control Group. So they're the guys, and Tony, the lady, that had the duty cards.
Yep.
And I guess I was in the very fortunate position of having recruited each and every one of them. I was the first full-time employee at Beaconsfield back in 1995. So I'd been there 10 years, and the newest member of that critical management team, Rex, had been with us 7 years. So we'd known each other for a minimum of 7 years. We'd done, outdoor aired canoeing, rock sail, abseiling things. We'd done in-house. We did Myers-Briggs, where we shared the personality profiles.
Yeah, what was yours?
So I didn't want to share mine. I just wanted to see what my employees were. But I did. I did. But it went with a caveat that, and we had a great guy called Rob Long who helped us in that safety management, psychology of safety, risk space. Yep. Rob's fantastic, and stayed in touch with him. Rob would say that different is not wrong. Different is just different. And it wasn't to have water cooler chats about, Matt's, this, that, or the other. And what I found invaluable about that was it helped explain some of the behaviours that I would see in my senior management team.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite understand why. And I didn't want to read too much into it, and I'm not an HR expert, but it was a useful part of the whole jigsaw puzzle in terms of understanding the people we're working with.
Did you see any of that translate into the response and behaviours that you see in those worst case moments?
Yeah, so I noticed that people under extreme stress have a default behaviour, and I've seen that since as well, where sometimes a true behaviour comes out that you maybe not aware of. And so one of the lessons out of my experience at Beaconsfield was don't necessarily expect people that you've known for quite a while to behave as you would expect them to behave. Be aware that under stress people may do things or say things or behave quite different to what you've known them to be.
Yeah. The benefit, though, of understanding that beforehand helps to, I suppose, appreciate when those moments come that you can see this behaviour potentially on the horizon, or preempt it a little bit at least, I think. So I've definitely seen the same thing happen with our sort of teams over time, where you do get to understand that behaviour beforehand. Then when you're in the real situation, you can then preempt some of those behaviours that you'll definitely see in that worst case.
Although sometimes you need the real scenario to bring out that.
It out. Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. And no one can really fully prepare for those.
Just don't assume.
Yeah. Back to the moment when it all kicked off, Matt, can you walk us through your first moments when you first received that phone call, and I suppose what was going through your mind as a leader of that site at the time?
So I just finished watching the footy, being ANZAC Day, and phone call from Rex Johnson, who was following exactly the emergency call-out procedure.
Yeah.
So, now commonplace to at least have, when the shift boss made the call underground to the winder driver, who was the central command, on night shift.
Yep.
And the winder driver had a list of things to do and people to call, and Rex was one of them. And then Rex had a series of calls to make, Mines Rescue, the underground manager, Pat Ball, who I should have mentioned earlier, as one of the key members of the senior management team.
Yep.
And ringing myself. So, Rex gave me the call at 9:35-ish on the evening of ANZAC Day. And so I still remember that. I was in the bedroom and driving, I was in Launceston, so about a half an hour drive down the Tamar Valley to the mine site, wondering whether it was a drill.
Yeah.
Until the ambulance overtook me. And, getting to site, and the police were already there. So I still remember, going down onto the brace to the tag board and meeting might have even been Newey, the police were already there.
Yeah. And
just getting a brief. And then going back to my office and getting out the emergency response book and turning to my page.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't written down, the chance of either panic or confusion or not making the right calls or making the best use of the time you've got. And so, ring my boss, lawyers, whatever, was essential to save, a bad situation potentially
getting worse.
Yeah.
Had that been well drilled into you beforehand as a team, and had you prepared using those tools?
Yeah, we had, so New South Wales Mines Rescue, so HATSI again, both at the senior management team practice level, but also, we sent our Mines Rescue guys to Lithgow for training in their smoke tunnels and what have you. And we were looking at a metalliferous Mines Rescue module at the time.
Yep.
So never used it, in anger in real life, but had, some degree of basis for what we knew we needed to do.
One of the challenges we definitely find in working that preparation side for clients is dedicating that time to actually going through the process of activating those under near real-time condition. Now, we know, you and I both know, you can never properly simulate those real-time conditions, but reflecting back on those moments earlier, how important was it, or would you recommend at least now, to ensuring that you are practicing that in near real-time pressure as you can Because, if you're able to reflect on that now and go, okay, this is where it worked, this is what's important you to give advice now.
Yeah, it's always hard in a production environment to find the time.
Yeah.
And you don't have the real life imperative because it's a practice session.
Yeah.
And the ones I've been in are often quite clumsy, but something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
And at least people being familiar that they need to set up a control room, that they need to clear the desks, that they need to, man the phones, that they know that there are certain folders in the cupboard over there that's got the duty cards that then they can read. Even those basics, having a whiteboard with pens, like just having the basics, knowing that. Because the actual drill itself, and often you'll have someone, ringing in, pretending to be whatever, and we all know it's not real.
Yeah.
But even just the basics of what to do right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're struggling to work out what to do. There's chaos going on, and just having some sense of control or idea of what you should be doing, rather than running around, panicking. I think is the fundamental bit out of any session that's practicing. Yeah.
It's hard to get that sense of that chaos that was happening on site. Can you walk us through? You've gone through your process, which sounded really controlled. Sounded like you were reflecting on your checklists that you have in play. But can you give us a sense of what was also then going on? Because there's a lot more activity also happening around there in those immediate few hours, wasn't there?
Yeah, so the police were invaluable, and Paul Reynolds in particular pulled me aside at one stage in the breezeway, just he and I, and said, "Oh, what are you going to do?"
Yeah,
which was a really good question, which I hadn't actually asked myself that.
Yeah,
he suggested that, and I described the scenario, and at that stage it wasn't in the control of the police or the coroner, but obviously they were involved. And he said, what about the words access the site safely. So that became for me a sentence that when, this or that occurred, I would ask myself, does this or that respond to the objective, access the site safely?
Yeah.
And if it didn't,
don't do it.
Yeah. And so that brought a bit of purpose to what we were trying to do, because, we didn't know the state of 3 guys.
Yep.
We'd accounted for the other 14 on the crew, and they were back out from underground. We're still trying to assess, what do we do next? So that was invaluable. And again, the collective team, like the support, if it was just one person, it would be very lonely.
Yeah.
But having the team around and thinking and contributing, again, brought a sense of not calmness, but let's think our way through what we've got to do and what are the options.
The objective is something we always recommend, is that first bit of advice that a commander would give. In this case, you're the commander of this situation, being the mine manager. How important was that also for the people underground? Because what was happening underground there that you don't have any control over? So
we pulled the crew out, and then with mutual aid from a mines rescue point of view, we had mines rescue people underground.
Yeah.
But to a point I made earlier, we found that some people were doing, or were going into the area that
where the collapse had happened.
Yeah, it was beyond my thinking what someone would do that.
Yeah.
Seismically active, potential rockfall.
Yeah. But they're focused on the problem, I think. Too,
and I learned subsequent to that a lot of that's why people run back into burning buildings to save people.
Yeah.
So I absolutely understand, but at the time, so we needed to put up barricades, what have you, to prevent that, and that got a little bit of control back into, and then in any mining environment. There's management, mine superintendent, foreman, supervisor, employee. Yeah. So, very structured, just like in the army.
Yes, yeah.
And so that decision-making and flow down but then back up. So we had comms between the underground and surface. And so Pat Ball, the underground manager, was regularly underground. We had Mines Rescue. Underground, we had New South Wales Mines Rescue. Had some ambulance people. So a lot of communication was essential between the underground, 925 metres vertically underground, and the control room, and that was pretty regular. And commentary was recorded and written down, so we had some sense, and everyone could see then, what was unfolding. Because
you are separated from the scene, like you said, 925 metres vertically from where you are, how difficult is it to, I suppose, establish and maintain some element of control over what's happening at that face or where the incident scene was?
So we would meet twice a day.
Yep.
And that would be a room full of everyone from the critical incident management team.
Yep.
Police, Mines Rescue, New South Wales Ambulance, Tas Ambulance, all the contributors, be about 20 odd people, including lawyer.
Yeah.
Right. And our media liaison guy, Mike Lester, who was also instrumental in trying to manage the external probably more than the internal. And and those meetings were, okay, what have we been doing the last 12 hours?
Yep.
We'd start off with the health and wellbeing. Once we'd found the two guys alive, what was their status, what's the plan there, what's the plan for the day, and then pretty much go and execute that. And whether it was a shift supervisor or mine foreman or Pat, underground and communications, and that was regular. So the control room was always manned.
Yeah.
And then we'd meet again at the end of the day shift and repeat it. Make sure that people were rostered off then, including me. Took a while for them to get me out of the room, but go home.
Understandable.
From a fatigue point of view. And so it just worked like that, task to be done.
Yep.
Welfare of the people,
Yeah.
what are the activities we're going to do to access the site safely.
Yeah, and planning that went behind that, and then the cascade of that communication and objective to each. So it's very military-like in the way that it's executed.
Correct.
Because orders groups cascade. Then once you're in the field and you're active, then you're responding and adapting to the situation as it evolves. But there's still that requirement and an obligation still to inform your higher command about what's going on and what the changes in the environment look like. So it's very similar to the way that we would operate in those circumstances, or in the military circumstances as well. When you talk about then the leadership and the accountability component behind that, so you had a team that was formed pretty rapidly that you've been working with. That expanded pretty extensively then into other services and police and ambulance and SCAT teams you mentioned there as well. How did you go about getting them and aligning them with your objective and the way that you were working?
For the first, it's 20 years ago, for the first 3 days, we didn't know the fate of any of the three.
Yeah.
So at that stage, it was, the site team, and from memory, Tassie Mines Rescue teams and the local police and the local Tas ambulance.
Yeah.
And an amount of media. On day 3, we recovered the body of Larry Knight, and you can imagine the impact on the team and the mood, and the thinking that the chances then or likelihood of the other two being okay, but we still, and again this was a tip from the police inspector. If I take a step back, one key learning was not to be precious about command and control, and that you don't know everything about everything, and there are experts out there that might be able to help, and the police, and Paul Reynolds was a really good example. So the breezeway conversation about access to site safely, he also said, you want to think about the language you use, because if we were saying it's a recovery, even though we didn't know the fate of the two people, what are we telling people? So it was always a rescue, and that was really important. So then on day 5, we found out that Todd and Brant were still alive, and that completely changed. The media flocked back, twice or 3 times as many as were there previously.
Yeah.
And that's where we realised the situation had just got a lot harder.
Yeah.
And that's where we called in a lot of the SCAT team, so Rural North Shore people, including Paul Featherstone and paramedics and New South Wales Mines Rescue. And the first 5 days was, crazy enough, but having found them alive, that just changed everything. And ultimately, with 200 odd people behind the scenes.
It's a massive logistics effort with the added dimension of being under the spotlight then of the world. How were you feeling as the leader at that time, knowing or bearing that responsibility for that rescue effort and coordinating it once you'd found them alive and wanting to keep them alive? And
that became the second slogan. The first one being access to site safely.
Yep.
And then exactly was flipped into having found them alive, keep them alive. So trying to take the timeline out of the equation.
Yeah. So when you say the timeline out of the equation, the time for how it doesn't take.
Don't risk it.
Don't risk it.
And it ultimately took 10 days.
And how much tension were you getting though?
A lot of frustration. And a lot of that from the media, and a lot of that were mistakes we made about thinking it might just be 48 hours and then another day and then another day. So we learnt don't do that.
Yeah.
Because things changed and got harder and easier. And a lot of people have asked me, how did I? Look, I'm a mining engineer. I consider myself a normal human being. My comment would be that my brain just shut out stuff. That wasn't me being smart or clever. I think that was just a survival instinct. And when people say, tunnel vision, pardon the pun, was that it just didn't. I can only rationalise that my brain didn't allow me to think about the what ifs.
Yeah.
Because I would have gone to pieces, right? It would have just been overwhelming, the responsibility of 2 people, 200 people helping, families, Todd and Brant, the media pressure. So that's my only rationale for how I got through that. I don't think I ever saw the TV during that period. Obviously I couldn't avoid the media that were out there physically. But I don't recall reading a newspaper or watching the TV. I mean, I was a little bit busy at the time.
Yeah.
And so that's the only rationale I've got for how. And I just think that's a human survival thing, to peel away stuff and just focus on it.
How did you then focus the rest of the team in that same instance? Because, again, they'd all be feeling that same sort of sense of dread and emotion and also feeling all that tension from the externals. How did you help them narrow their focus as well?
The regular comms meetings that we would have, they were always involved in that. It wasn't siloed at all. And so, the team had as much information as anyone else did in that room.
And so we would call that the common operating picture or common situational awareness. I think you told me previously that you had diagrams up around the walls. Can you describe what that control room looked like so that it gave them that awareness?
Yeah, no, it was untidy. So I had stuff all over the table. We had whiteboards. It was an ATCO, so it was magnetic walls.
Yeah.
So we had stuff magnet pinned up. So we had pictures of the rescue basket, so we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
We had cut out the circle diameters of how big the holes were that the guys were going to come out from. We had audio visual. We had whiteboards. One thing we didn't have in our mines rescue practicing but was invaluable was we got the surveyors strips, verti-plan strips and butcher's paper and hung that up on the wall and would literally just write down what we were hearing on the phone at the time.
Yeah.
Because I would take a call from underground and, of course, you've got a room full of people, what's being said. Well, I would actually, or whoever was on the phone would write down what, the key points. So everyone could see what was being said in real time from underground. But then when the oncoming shift came in, they could see. So that, that involvement with all sorts of visual displays. We had a whiteboard that was just full of all the options as well, and that stayed there as well. So, full engagement was essential.
Going back to the advice from the police commissioner at the time around what's your plan, how did you evolve your plan and start to, I suppose, stream out the different options that you had the teams considering? Because I think that was a masterstroke.
So I remember within 24 hours of finding Todd and Brant alive, so the following evening, we'd flown in New South Wales Rescue and the SCAT team from, there was something like 400 years of rescue experience around the table. And that, in a strange way, was reassuring that, we've actually assembled a pretty knowledgeable team.
Yeah.
And so one of the things was we had a session, sort of like a brainstorming session about, okay, this is the situation. What are the options to, access the site safely?
Yeah.
Because the couple hundred tonnes of rock had fallen on top of them. It was 40 metres of unsafe drive. It's a bit like the storybook. Can't go over them, can't go under them, can't go around them. And so we had sessions, and we had miners from underground as well, and we went just through. Whether it was a raise bore or drill and blast or timbering or bobcats or excavators and we did little breakout sessions with each of those, and the guys would go away and look at the relative merit of what it was and come back and go, okay, well, based on all of the crazy, because I'm not crazy, which was great.
Yeah.
What was the most likely to be successful, irrespective of time, and the minimal risk to Todd and Brant. And that's where the idea of turning the raise borer on its side, and they normally drill down, they don't normally then drill horizontally.
There you go.
And then how do we get rid of the material from the cuttings? And that was going to take time. We had to mobilise a rig from Rosebery. So Rod Bertram, who's the Managing Director of Racebore Australia, intimately involved, said not a problem, pulled the rig off halfway through a job in Rosebery, had to get a certain diameter reaming head for the machine. That had to come from Adelaide, where RBA's headquarters were. Rod organised all of that. They held up the Spirit of Tasmania sailing to get that onto the boat. So whole team effort. That created a degree of frustration. How long is it going to take? Was it taking so long? Not a lot of people probably appreciated, can't you just run in and get them out? And that was, a snatch and grab. Was discussed.
It was an option,
A couple of guys almost tried to do that unauthorised. So lots of thinking went into what was the safest but timely, but while the two of them were okay physically, a lot of effort into their mental well-being during that time, and sustenance and food and drink, and so that we just used the team, used the knowledge, weren't too precious, flushed out ideas, tried to do some logic to which would work, and always have plans in the background. Whether it was timbering or a snatch and grab if plan A didn't work.
And they were just ready to go, so you could switch over if at some stage that plan was now deemed to be a potential failure, you'd switch over to another option straight away. Is that the way you'd structured it?
We knew what we would probably need to do second, but we weren't necessarily immediately ready. So if it was a re-timbering support exercise, we would need to round up all of that, but we at least had the concept of what next. I mean, we didn't have a lot of resources to have too many ready-to-go actions, but we at least had an idea of the ready-to-go plans.
Perfect, In between that, you mentioned that at some stages there different people were taking the situation into their own hands. How did you resolve or deal with those sort of situations and the threat, I suppose, to the people individually by doing that? And then secondly, how the team was also challenged by that tension between wanting to do the right thing and save these two miners, but also the threat that posed to each of them by putting himself in those positions. How'd you deal with those?
Yeah, so we ended up having to guard access to the site, but also the mines inspector.
Yeah.
So Fred Sears.
Yeah.
Got everyone together and wasn't a finger pointing, but just explained that it's a mines rescue scene. There's a degree of control by the inspectorate, and that's a prohibited activity. So that was the easiest way of getting across the severity of doing that, not just for the safety of the individuals who would believe they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But also for Todd and Brant, and there's commentary around a pair of wire cutters being used, and the first strand pinging when it was broken as a sign that it was under load, and the commentary is that I haven't actually confirmed it with Todd. The commentary was from Todd and Brant, stop.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
That tension of the time for the rescue, when did it sort of hit its real, I suppose, the highest tension point in that whole rescue? What was one of those critical, or we call them a decisive point? What was a decisive point that happened in that whole rescue for you from memory?
So it's probably two. One, the phone call from Pat Ball from underground.
When it starts it,
that the two were alive.
Yeah.
It was a Sunday evening. I still remember what it was. And then the other point was probably the final 1 to 2 feet, breaking through from competent solid rock into where Todd and Brant were, on day 13, and making sure that breakthrough didn't trigger, a further rockfall. So the amount of work that went around that with jackhammers, with low energy explosives, and Darren Flanagan played a key role in that. So the last foot or two was done with jackhammer and low explosive energy, but leading up to that, we'd had Todd and Brant pouring concrete grout from the inside, so where they were, onto the loose rock.
Yeah.
And cementing that together so that when we did break through,
it didn't all collapse
to the degree that we could hold some of that around them. So that was a very tense moment, that breakthrough.
In that moment, what was sort of going through your mind, especially around the decisions that you needed to make sure that was going to break through in the safe way that it did in the end? Yeah,
so, and it's probably a bit hard in this conversation, but so we had diagrams of so for the listener, we had raised boards, so drilled a circular tunnel. It's about 15 metres long, it was about 1 metre diameter, and that was the escape way that the guys were to come out. So the last couple of feet, we stopped the big rotating head from grinding away this circular hole, and did the jackhammers and this low density explosive, and we were probably within a foot of breaking through, and the guys from the tunnel, we drilled some probe holes. We wanted to know exactly where we were relative to where they were.
Yeah.
And so from our tunnel, we drilled, one hole to the right, one straight ahead, and one to the left. And we had phone contact, so we had video and phone contact with Todd and Brant.
Yeah.
And we asked them to tell us, where these breakthrough holes were, and which one was left, which one was centre, and which one was right. And so this is day 13 in the evening, and we're that close.
Yeah.
And so we had survey control, but the feedback we were getting back from Todd and Brant didn't align with what we believed to be the case.
Yeah.
So, and we've got the full team in the control room, and so the conversation is, well, are we going to do the last breakthrough to the right or the left? And someone in the room said, for God's sake, Matthew, make a decision. And I said, you guys have got all the same information I've got. You tell me when you've worked it out. And I left the room. So, you don't have to make a decision. And what am I going to do? Believe Todd and Brant, and we're going to believe the survey.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, about half an hour later, it was as simple as we were looking down the tunnel that way, and Todd and Brant were looking at it that way. So our right is their left, and our left is their right, right? But 13 days in fatigue, and we didn't. But that was why there was a confusion. And so a lesson out of that was pressure to make a decision, but maybe sometimes the best decisions don't make a decision.
Yeah.
Till you've got more information.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you trusted the time on that whole process as well was important. So you didn't want to rush it at the end at that most critical moment.
The pressure to do it.
Pressure to do it would have been
media waiting, families waiting. I heard the story. We were accused of keeping them underground until a Monday morning, so Sunrise could, do the money shot at 6 a.m.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those wider impacts and how that sort of evolved throughout the whole response. Because at the start, like you said, it was local media. There was definitely interest, obviously, in the fact that there was this underground event that had happened. Unfortunately, when Larry was found as deceased, that sort of did change the whole dynamic there. But can you talk us through the external pressure and how that evolved over time from the media, the different stakeholders that became part of the daily briefings that we saw on the TV, how that evolved?
Not a lot of people probably realise that the company was in administration. So my boss was an insolvency practitioner based in Perth. So I didn't have a CEO or an MD or chairman, HR, head office. And it was a comment, don't ask someone to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. And so that's why I ended up out there. In some ways I think that probably worked to a degree because the media were getting it firsthand. Yeah. From the organ grinder, not the chipmunk. And we can talk about, all of that. But so being in administration, there was a vacuum at a corporate level. Great support from a chap called Mike Lester, media liaison out of Hobart. Yeah. And, he and I worked really well together. We said, okay, well, there's a thirst for information. There's going to be stories happening. We do have some obligation to probably let people know what's going on. Yeah. And so, the commitment was to give a media briefing once a day. Yep. Mike and I would prepare, 3 key points. Try and stick to that. Know whether we're going to do Q&A or not. But there are other stakeholders. Most people would, from that time, would probably recall, Bill Shorten being on TV.
He only came after you'd found them alive.
So initially it was Paul Howes, who was Bill's 2IC with the AWU. Yeah. Bill came along on day 3, so he and I think first sat down and I briefed him on about day 3 or 4 from memory. They had the politics at the time, so our employment arrangement was a federal workplace agreement. Yeah. So Peter Reith era, so direct employer-employee. So one of the first in the mining industry, rather than enterprise bargaining. Not that I've got any issue with unions. In fact, I've been an AWU member myself. So that and it was John Howard era. So there was Kim Beazley. So there was a political overlay. There was a union overlay, and then of course it was literally a life and death story. Yeah. And I think people's the mystique of underground, and so it captured a lot of people's interest. Yeah. And media, and so when we'd found the 2 alive, CNN. Yeah. Oprah Winfrey, Sunrise, Carl Stefanovic, Richard Carlton,
Eddie Maguire.
Yeah, so it just, you'd never contemplate that happening.
Yeah, I think probably the only thing we could think of right now that would have been anywhere near the scale is probably Bondi more recently with the scale of
Yeah,
media
so it was
coverage
the biggest,
around
I've been
that.
told, biggest media event in Australia at the time.
So that has an impact, and normally an organisation, like you said, would have another layer, a corporate layer that could address all of that wider external noise that was happening on you. How did you manage yourself and manage your own time, and also the time of your team there, who were getting all this attention as well at the same time?
Yeah, my comment to people is I was a little bit busy at the time.
Yeah, of course.
I reflect and I have a wry smile when people talk about media management because you can't manage them.
No.
You know, their bread and butter is the inquiry. You know, they've got a boss that you know is wanting the story, you know, to fill the columns, you know, so on and so on. So, you know, my approach was, you know, right or wrong, you know, they are a stakeholder.
Yeah.
They have a job to do. You know, they're human. They're under pressure. And my mum, you know, when I was growing up, my mum, you know, one of the many pearls of wisdom was the less lies you have to tell, the less you have to remember.
Yeah.
And so with Mike Lester, we would just stick to the facts. And I think the media responded to that, committed to once a day, missed one day, and I strayed off the facts one day, which gave rise to this whole Foo Fighters story, which is funny in its own right.
Funny, yeah.
in a bizarre
Yeah.
sort of black humour way. So, yeah, look, it was just sticking to what we had to do, knowing, you know, that was going on and going, okay, well, the best I can do is, you know, once a day.
We know through a friend that we came to know after the whole event, Rodney Lowe's, who was one of the reporters at the time, there's a lot of other things that were happening where they were, for example, radios were being listened to or intercepted or provided to them. How did that start to affect the wider rescue with all that media involvement, engagement? Did it start to have an impact on them at all noticeably, or were we able to still focus them on the fact that we've got two people underground, we're trying to get out of here safely?
Yeah, so, you know, there were some elements of the media that were fairly aggressive. You know, we put up screening around the fence and, you know, one of the channels cut a hole
in
through
it.
that. One of them started to build scaffolds.
We saw the ladders and all those
things. Over the top. And
the
the police media liaison guy was brilliant. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name. But again, the police media liaison said, I'll take care of it. And he rounded up the media and said, look, behaviour's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Because they were all going to scramble for the day they came out.
The moment they come out, yeah.
And so the police media liaison guy said, okay, media, you choose one cameraman, one. So he put on the media, and there would be a pooled commentary and pooled shot. So I would never have thought of that, but great support there. What we said to the teams, mobile phones weren't as common 20 years ago, but to a degree they were, and obviously, they could clock off, and go and
Well, you didn't have social media either then.
No, so. but could have obviously caught up with them, in the car park or the pub or what have you. What we did is we appealed to them and said, look, we can't stop you, but have some respect and put yourself in Todd and Brant's position that our commitment as the company is to let the families know first.
Yeah.
And we would prefer you guys not to go talk about what's going on, because that's not helpful. And we didn't want the families to know about it first on the TV, like the Truman Show, with Jim Carrey. So that appealed to the guys at that level, rather than some sort of autocratic take your phones off you or block airways or what have you. From what I'm aware of, and I was pretty busy at the time, I think generally worked.
Yeah, it's definitely the right appeal, I think, and we do that now, especially around social, because you can't stop.
You can't, correct.
You can't, and you can spend a lot of time trying to find leaks or any of those sort of things.
And if someone wants to,
they'll do it anyway.
Work away around
so it's human nature, but that appeal to the impact it's causing on the loved ones in particular, I find is always a good.
Yeah, and that was our commitment. So that for instance, when we found the two guys alive, we sent Rex Johnson, the safety manager to the families.
Yeah.
Sit in the room.
Yep.
This doesn't go outside the room.
Mm-hmm.
We'll let the families know first.
Shifting fire a little bit here, or the impact on that workforce that were involved. You've been going for a number of days, for a number of weeks, essentially in the final rescue. How did you manage that fatigue and that other emotional impact on them over that duration? You mentioned before about taking a bit of time out at different stages. How did you ensure that was being handled and that emotional levels were being handled across that?
We didn't think it'd go for 14 days.
No.
We didn't even think, we thought we could handle it initially internally.
Yeah.
But even in that first 5 days, it became evident. So we ended up with some of the butcher's paper, drawing up a roster, handwritten.
Yep.
Role, right? Primary contact, safety, security, admin, mines rescue, who, time in, time out, including me.
Yeah.
Had a brilliant 2IC in Richard Holder, so he became my night shift cover.
Yeah.
It's a comment that I make that it's probably fair to say you often don't know you're fatigued and you think you're making good decisions and you don't want to let go.
No.
And what's going to happen if I'm not there? But the worst of two options is that you're making bad decisions because you are fatigued.
Yeah.
But it took us a while to realise that. And so we had to actually make people, when they'd finished their 12-hour shift, go home.
Consciously leave, yeah.
Yeah,
Physically
like they
get
thought,
out of there.
I don't want to leave, I'd prefer to hang around, just help out. No, best thing they can do for everyone, including themselves, but for everyone, is to go and get, to the degree they can, a bit of a break.
Yeah.
Because they come back and they're fatigued. It's not good for them, but it's not good for everyone or for anyone. So having enough resources to know that you can have back-to-back cover, and if something happened, on the end of a phone.
The resilience that you're building by just putting that roster in place was important. How much did you see also that human impact over that time with your team, and did you have to change any people out at different stages? Did you have to sort of take more dramatic steps into it to making sure that you were focusing in on those two that mattered?
One in particular, and I don't think it's fair to name them, but yes, we needed to be mindful and make sure some people maybe were taken out of the direct line of fire. Yeah. Whether they were tired, involved, emotionally or physically. So certainly being aware that there was a big physical and mental workload. Yeah. And that's where I mentioned a chap called Rob Long, who's psychologist and did a lot of our safety training and behavioural-based stuff and the Myers-Briggs stuff. Would float around, almost literally, and I didn't know this at the time, observer, including watching me. Yeah, right. I didn't even know he was doing that, or Rex was doing that. And so, having one or two people quietly tasked to just, you need to have that emotional intelligence and empathy for people to be able to spot. Because if you're a big, sort of alpha male, you're probably not going to pick up some signs. Yeah. So Rex and Rob in particular, part of their gig, which I didn't know about at the time, was just to keep an eye on a number of people.
It's an important step during, but how important was also that post the event? Because the psychosocial impacts now we're more familiar with now. It's even legislated now. But how did that sort of help then in that transition? Because that recovery, the post event, when everything sort of and finished, how did that help then or enable that sort of transition to that recovery stage from that psychosocial?
One thing that we didn't do well was the recovery post-incident, and that's not just the financial, it was the people bit. Yeah. We didn't do that well at all. 20 years ago, I don't recall the language about post-traumatic stress. Certainly psychosocial health matters 20 years ago.
Never heard psychosocial back then.
No, don't think so.
We definitely had post-traumatic stress of indicators, but we didn't really understand
I don't recall as a mining engineer running a mine that it was in any sort of common language.
No.
So we thought we were doing the right thing. We let the employees have a paid month off.
Yep.
Probably the worst thing we could have done. Not the paid bit, but the month off. We thought that, going home, resting, spending time with family, recovering would be, the right thing to do.
Yeah.
On reflection and feedback and hindsight was that the experience they'd been through, they just bottled up. We had social workers and psychologists available, but you can't make someone go to counselling.
No.
And big tough mind. A lot of people didn't take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But also didn't want to burden their partner or family with what they'd experienced.
Yeah, of course.
And that wasn't good for them and their families. In another event that I've recently been through, what we did for that was that we got them together again.
Yeah.
Whether it was off-site social barbecue with families or whether it was back on-site, but with no work planned, where they could at least talk with people that have got the shared experience, who would understand and try and go through, that trauma cycle of shared experience and talking about it. So we didn't do it at Beaconsfield well. The senior management team, I think we had the weekend off and then we were straight into planning redundancies.
Yeah.
So we didn't do it well for the senior management team either.
How many lessons did you take away from what you went through there, and were they top of mind for you in those recent events?
Yeah, so the people recovery, business recovery is important, obviously, company and shareholders and what have you, but the people recovery...
the livelihoods too for the people who are involved with their community-based assets as well, aren't they? So.
But being sensitive to what they've gone through, the loss of, workmates, and, the saying, getting them back on the horse, but doing it in an empathetic way.
Yeah.
And people... reacted differently post the event. So being sensitive that some people would be okay and some people might seem okay, and some people would be obviously not okay, and so that was certainly a lesson that we didn't do well at Beaconsfield.
Is there anything now that you reflect back? It is the 20-year anniversary coming up this ANZAC Day. Is there any other sort of things that you reflect back on now? Firstly, positively about the experience. It's as difficult as it was. What were some of the positive experiences that you've sort of taken, or positive memories you've had, and you're taking away now in everything you do? Yeah,
so one thing is exactly this chat that we're doing now, is sharing. It's my experiences, and other people have had different experiences and recollections of what happened.
Yeah.
But trying to share some of that. The mining industry is not particularly good at sharing lessons learned.
No.
And I tell myself, well, out of that tragedy and that experience, because a lot of that, the risk management and the emergency preparedness and training beforehand, how you manage a crisis when it occurs, and media management and stakeholder management. And then afterwards, the business recovery, the people recovery, the coronial inquest, there's lots of lessons that I think are still relevant today, as they were 20 years ago. I think the industry is a lot more mature, but it's not just in the mining industry. I've with you in a consultancy role, given it to lawyers and ports authorities and what have you. So a lot of the underlying lessons, whether it's preparedness, response or recovery, those three compartments, I think are still pretty relevant.
100%. And I think, we've seen it more recently, even with cyber events. You wouldn't think a cyber event would have a psychosocial impact, but for everyone that has to deal with the stakeholders that are affected by those situations, they're your front line of inquiries from customers and clients, and frustration and aggression and all those sort of things. So the messages, I think, 100% ring true. We're 20 years in now, so what's probably one of the some of those things that you wish you could go back and maybe do a little bit differently this time, Matt?
business recovery would be something we'd do absolutely differently.
Yeah.
That's probably the first, what would we do differently? Second guessing yourself after the events, I find not very helpful thought process in energy and thinking. And if it was something, well, I can't do anything about it, so is that particularly productive or helpful? Unless there was something I could do about it.
Yeah.
And as I said, that post-event recovery, learn a lot about people and behaviour. I made that point. Don't assume people will behave as you expect them to.
Yeah.
And a critical point I made also, trust your team.
Yeah.
And I said that at one, it was a resources regulator, so Mines Inspectors Conference in New South Wales, and one of my points was trust your team, because they're on your team and they're part of your crisis management team. And if you don't trust them, why they're on your team? Yeah. And a GM came to me afterwards and said, "You were dead right, and I've just fired one of my managers." But point being, if anything I can do for the industry is make people reflect. So the title of my talk previously is Beaconsfield, don't think it won't happen to you. And that sort of sums it up. Like you can't be prepared for such a intense 14-day period, but you're going to have some basic building blocks in place, and I think that's important.
Well, I think it's a good point to finish on about the team in particular there, Matt, and I think given your experience and your willingness to share so openly what you've been through, I think that is something that's quite refreshing, because we're seeing it still within the industry, in particular in mining. There is obviously a reluctance to share these lessons because of the various outcomes that can happen for people that do. So it's really refreshing to see you doing exactly that and sharing those stories now. So thank you very much for joining us on the podcast again. So appreciate your time again.
And thanks for the opportunity, Grant.
20 years on, Beaconsfield remains a powerful reminder that leadership is ultimately tested through values rather than certainty, through courage, initiative, teamwork, respect, and mateship. As we approach ANZAC Day, those values resonate deeply for me. They speak not only to how we act in moments of adversity, but to the responsibility leaders carry after adversity, when people are still healing, learning, and finding their way forward. At Left to Boom, this is why we focus on preparing leaders before crisis strikes and supporting them after the moment that defines them, building trust and resilience over the long term. Thank you for listening, and lest we forget.